If tomorrow starts without me, there's something you should know. While I hold you close, never let you go.
Hello and welcome to The Broken Pack, a podcast focused on giving sibling loss survivors a platform to share their stories and to be heard, something that many sibling loss survivors state that they never have had. Sibling loss is misunderstood. The Broken Pack exists to change that and to support survivors. I'm your host, Dr. Angela Dean. In this episode, I spoke with Dr. Christina Zampitella. She's noted for creating the term surviving sibling in her dissertation in the early 2000s. I spoke to her about losing her brother, Damien, what it's like to be a psychologist and thanatologist, coping with her loss and her grief, what she's learned, and what advice she has to siblings. But most importantly, what her experience has been as a surviving, grieving sibling.
Cause you never know, you just never know.
Content warning: this episode contains talk of substance use, which may be upsetting to some people. So, how would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Well, I can start out talking about how I know you.
Sure, whatever you want to say.
So I was honored enough to meet Angela when I was at the Portland Institute for Loss and Transitions annual retreat on Bainbridge Island, which that would be its own podcast all by itself. Just getting
Sure
to where we needed to go. And she approached me and told me who she was and what she was doing. And then when I found out she has this podcast on adult surviving siblings, I was like, you must make this happen, because this is the whole reason why I got into the field of thanatology, which is death, loss, and grief, right? I'm a psychologist and I am licensed in Delaware and in California. I've lived in both places. I am the founder and owner of the Center for Grief and Trauma Therapy in Pike Creek, Delaware, which is obviously an organization that specializes in grief and trauma group practice, with an amazing group of people, all who have their own subspecialties, which has been fantastic. And we continue to expand and deepen the kind of work that we do. I'm an adjunct professor, so I teach at a couple universities, and I develop courses and certificate programs in grief and loss. I'm a professional speaker, as you know, and I do that internationally, and which is cool to be able to say, because that international part has just recently emerged over the last couple of years. I'm going to wear that with pride.
You should. You absolutely should.
It's taken me 20 years to get to that point. And I'm an adult surviving sibling, and I have a significant amount of loss in my life. And I'm here to talk about that. I'm here to share my story and my narrative and answer questions, and not only come, I think, from a professional standpoint, like really, I want to tell my story. I want to see how this is organic, because I think a lot of times when I've had people on my own podcast, which is Phoenix Rising with Dr. Z, it's easy if I have a clinician to get into the clinical stuff, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to land all the time with people who are experiencing or have experienced similar kinds of losses and want to know about that. I don't need to go into didactic training, blah, blah, blah. I can weave it in, but I'm here to tell my story, and I'm not going to promise I'm not going to cry. So just be aware of
That's
these things.
totally fine. I'm so glad that you're on here. And I've mentioned on this podcast and elsewhere, including in the classes that I teach, that after my brother died, as psychologists with access to research, what do? We look for the research to help us understand what's going on. And there were very few helpful articles out there, except for one written by you in 2011. And so thank you.
I'm honored by that.
Yeah. And then I met you and I was like, oh, I feel like I've known you for years.
Right?
So,
just like an immediate, there you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So welcome.
Thank you.
How would you introduce Damien to us?
I pause because I don't know if I can do it justice, but I'll try.
Okay.
So Damien is 4 years younger than me. We're very, very poor, very low socioeconomic status for majority of my upbringing. So Damien and I often turn to one another ways of trying to just figure out how to survive
Mm-hmm.
and finding ways to connect when you don't have the resources for your parents to take you on play dates and stuff like that. That didn't happen, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Damien was a character. He was extremely funny. He was like so soft inside, so empathetic, but wanted to be this like, you know, and we're an Italian American family. So there's like this cultural component of I need to be the strong guy, but Damien, well, for English and Irish too, I don't think that softened things any at all. But I think he wanted to come across as being a very strong, capable person, but he struggled with bipolar disorder and ADHD. And back in the 80s and early 90s, nobody knew what to do with that. Our field didn't know what to do with
Mm-hmm.
that. They barely knew how to even recognize it. So Damien was difficult in a lot of places to get along with, and we didn't recognize that a lot of it was the mood swings and the ADHD and the emotional dysregulation that comes with that. So we had some ambiguity in our relationship, some ambivalence in the relationship, because there'd be some times where, like, I wanted to smack the snot out of him, and then there were other times all I wanted to do was write my arms around him. I remember I had him on the back of my bike. We were kids and we were riding our bikes to go to the grocery store to help people put their groceries into their cars so we could make money and bring that back
Mm-hmm.
to our family.
Oh,
And my
well.
brother is on the back of my bike. The brakes are wet. We come down because, you know, 9-year-olds are brilliant. And we come down this hill and we go to turn. And I'm just trying to give you an example of what our relationship was like. And I went to turn, there was a car there. And in my infinite brilliance at 9 years old, instead of going into the parked car, I guess I decided to go into the street where that was, hit a car, went flying, and Damien, I don't even know where Damien was. And the next thing I know, you know, obviously I'm laying on the ground and, you know, I've got people all around me and I'm saying, how's Damien doing? Is Damien okay? And
Mm-hmm.
my brother's going, is Chrissy okay? Is Chrissy okay? We
Mm-hmm.
just didn't worry about but it was weird. As we got older, there were times where I couldn't even stand to be around him because he was
Mm-hmm.
so difficult, or he would steal and everything. Because he then moved into utilizing drugs, and I think it was a lot of self-medication for what was going on, and at 22 years old, he died from a drug overdose on Christmas Day. I feel like what I just said doesn't even capture him,
Mm-hmm.
but then there's wonderful, you know, stories of just a lot of deep love and other stories where it was extremely difficult in a family that didn't have a lot of resources, being brought up by two parents that are barely old enough to really have a family. If somebody gave me a kid at 20 years old, no, I can barely deal with the Delaware wrecking crew that lives in my house right now anyway. But you don't know that at that age. You don't know that. So I'm being brought up by two parents who had their own addiction issues and their own trauma
Mm-hmm.
issues. And you don't know that. You just know that you're trying to be whatever role you are in the family. And I was old. I even have a younger sister, Danielle, who's 7 years younger, but the two of them were closer because they would
Mm-hmm.
hang out a lot more. And I was also on a very different path.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the other thing, is like I was on this other path and I had this role in the family. It was very different than his. He was the black sheep and I was the golden child, right? I was martial arts and really good at school and did all the things and had to be the good one and the parentified kid because
Mm-hmm.
that's how I got the attention from mom and dad,
Mm-hmm.
which often would take me into a parental role with Damien and take me out of being able to be a sibling. So I lost some of that opportunity of knowing what it was like to actually have a sibling to whom I could have a close relationship, and then start, as years go by and as you move into adulthood, start thinking about, you know, how we're the holder of the family
Mm-hmm.
history. We are the sharing of the trauma, and we could share those experiences, and who's going to take care of mom and dad as they get older and all that. That was stripped and ripped
Mm-hmm.
away from me. I feel robbed. So I went on the scenic route, but you're going to have to do this is gonna have to
No,
be a
that's
scenic
okay.
route.
I think that was
So
really helpful. What was the age difference
4
between
years.
you two? 4 years. You were older.
Mhm.
I think that story says so much about both of you, right? You were
But the
both
bike one.
worried about the other. Yes.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That, of course, 9-year-olds should not be
He was
making those
riding on the
decisions. But
seat of my back and I was or my bike, and I was like standing up.
Yeah.
Nobody's watching out for us. Nobody's
Yeah.
saying, don't do dumb crap like that. What are you
Yeah.
thinking?
So as adults, well, he was barely an adult when he died.
Hmm.
Did your relationship change at all?
We were more estranged. And we were more estranged because, well, my mom and dad aren't alive anymore. So I'm just going to go ahead. I've disclosed this anyway before, but so when I was 18 years old, I launched out of the house like the next day.
Hmm.
Like as soon as I graduated high school, I was out and went off to college, and that was a whole debacle, but whatever. But I didn't realize it because I didn't really understand what drug abuse looked like and
Hmm.
drug addiction looked like. But I guess from the time I was 18, getting up to about 26 years of age, the addiction problems in my family became completely pervasive. My
Hmm.
mother, my father, my sister, and my brother all addicted to heroin, marijuana, cocaine, and I didn't know. We went from being a really weirdly enmeshed family
Hmm.
to basically I was ostracized. And I didn't understand why I was being ostracized. I didn't recognize it. I just know that I felt like really ripped apart and rejected and sad and angry and abandoned and just not understanding. It wasn't like I was asking my parents for money. We didn't have any. So
Hmm.
I went to school on a scholarship. I was barely surviving myself. I was bouncing around, trying to find places to live and stuff and having my own traumas. But all of a sudden, my mom and dad just weren't there. I would call and people wouldn't answer. And Damien like disappeared. Then he would go in and out of like jail, work release, and God knows what the heck my sister was doing because the 7 year difference was a lot. That was a lot to try
Hmm.
to bridge. It remains a problem. So I would say as we got older, we became more distant.
Hmm.
And so I feel like I lost my brother in some ways before he died. I lost him to drug use. And when I moved out, I lost him because I was ostracized. Then I lost him when he died and also lost any of the potential futures I could have had
Right.
with him and a lot of unfinished business.
I was
And he,
just thinking that
yeah.
phrase
Oh,
when you said that.
and I've done a lot of work around that.
Hmm.
Lot of time, when you're a thanatologist, like you said, I did my whole dissertation on adult surviving siblings, of course,
Hmm.
right? I'm going to, like you
Hmm.
said, we're going to try to figure it ourselves out. And that's exactly what was part of that. Yeah, lots of therapy, which I'm still in and always will be. I've told my therapist she's supposed to be my friend, my therapist, my mother, my teacher, and my colleague. Perfectly well aware I'm having a ton of transference. We
Yeah.
laugh at it, like
Yeah.
we know where the boundary is, but yeah, I need her to be all those things along with every one of my friends. But going back to your question, it became more estranged, but I don't think more angry. I didn't see him for an entire
Hmm.
year and then he died. So I hadn't seen Damien for a year and he died. So the next time I saw him, he was dead. It had been a year
Yeah.
and then he was dead. And then I got to see him in the emergency room, which was awful.
Yeah. What do you want to share about the lost story?
Oh my God. It's a big question. I think I need more help with that question.
Okay. So I know a little bit about
It's
this
okay.
from
Open
right.
it. You can, it's all you.
So
It's all, you can open it all. I'm okay.
you're estranged for that year. You mentioned that already that you lost him on Christmas. Do you want to walk us through that holiday season at all?
Yeah. What happened that night? So Christmas Eve, I was so at this point, I wasn't married, but I was with my first husband. Apparently, I like to collect them. I was with my first husband. I know. I got the door closed, so you can't hear it. All right. I was with my first husband, and we had 17 people coming over for Christmas dinner. I don't know what the hell I was thinking. And somehow, some way, my parents ended up deciding that they were going to come, which was weird. I was living in Pennsylvania. They were living in Jersey. Point again, I didn't see them a lot, but they decided to come, which was, fine. And then Damien called and I found out that he had run from work release 2 days before he was supposed to be released legally. So I
Mm.
have lots of feelings about that. I think he was just freaking out that he wasn't going to have the structure or whatever. And so he just sabotaged himself. And he ran with a friend. And at one point, he was on the phone. Either he called or I called. I don't remember. And I said, Damien, why aren't you here? And he's, well, I just ran from work release. I'm like, I'm well aware, but I haven't
Hmm.
seen you in a year. Where are you right now? I'm here at mom and dad's. I'm like, okay. And I was like, well, having Christmas dinner. He's like, well, I'm here with my friend. And I'm like, well, I don't want, two felons at my house. I was like, but it would be nice to see you. But he can't. He's like, well, I'm here with him. I'm like, well, he can't come. And everything was going on around me. And I said, look, I got to go. I got to make dinner. I love you. Bye. So the very last thing I ever said to my brother was, I love you, which I hang on to that
Oh.
a lot. We have the dinner, all of that. At this point, I'm recognizing what drug use looks like. I can see my parents are completely effed up. I don't know how much I'm allowed to curse on your thing, but I'm Italian.
You
We
can
love to
curse.
curse. Oh,
Yeah.
I can curse? Okay, they were
Yeah.
totally fucked up. I get a call that night, late, like before midnight. So it's Christmas. It was after
Mm.
the thing. And it was my sister, like, freaking out. "Damien's dead. Damien's dead." I'm like, "What are you talking about? Damien's dead. Damien's dead at mom's house." She's, like, freaking out.
Mm.
Now she lives not far from me, like a few miles from me. And I just go into parentified role. Like, we
Mhm.
don't know that. We don't have all of the answers yet. I'm just going to be calm. I'm freaking out, but okay, I'm going to be calm. And now we got to drive to New Jersey. And I don't even, I'd never even been to their house, much less, where the heck they were. And picked up Danielle and her boyfriend at the time. And she's in the back sobbing. And I regret, she doesn't remember this, but I regret this. I was like, just Danielle, stop crying. We do not know what's going on yet. That's
Mm.
never anything I would say now, but at that
Especially
point,
doing what you do now.
yeah,
I'm
like,
sure you would
what
not
an
say that. Yeah.
asshole move, like, on my part. But I think it was just a reflection of what was going on inside of
Mhm.
me, and I just couldn't see it. It was just too much, like, right there. So we drive and we park in the parking lot of the emergency room, and I can hear my mom screaming. And that's when I realized he was dead. And I walk in. I think one of the things, like, even when I look back on it now that pissed me off so bad is like the nurses look like they didn't know what the hell to do. They just looked so uncomfortable. Like there was nobody in there trying to console mom. I just know they were sitting behind the desk. I remember that very clearly. I walk into this room and Damien's on the table, gray, blue, and my mom and dad sitting on would be his right side. My mom sobbing. I don't even remember if my dad was crying. I don't think so. That that comes into play later on, but and even my husband, who was a Marine and German in his background, he was crying, and that probably was first time I ever seen that man cry. And I remember going out to the nurses station and them saying like something like, we should probably give her something to calm her down. I'm like, well, you have to be careful because she's a heroin addict. Be
Mm.
careful. You can't give her like a benzodiazepine because I don't know what that's going to do to her. And I was so ashamed.
You were ashamed. Mhm.
Yeah, for my family, but as a family member, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
I know my sister there was there, obviously, but I think I had my own level of shock. So it was so traumatic. There's unanticipated loss and then there's, traumatic loss. And this
Mhm.
absolutely was a traumatic loss, right? And I didn't really even understand what was happening. I don't remember leaving. I honestly cannot remember the
Mhm.
details after that. I later found out that later on that night of Christmas night, he and his friend had gotten hold of heroin and cocaine, and they got it from my ex-boyfriend, who was a fucking degenerate, and I
Mhm.
didn't realize how much he was involved with all the drug addiction and everything. We were long broken up at that point. So I guess he hadn't used in so long being in jail that I don't think he realized that you can't just go back to using as much as you
Mhm.
did before that. And so he had used, and his friend had watched him have a seizure and didn't call anybody. And I'm pretty sure, I don't think anybody would have been able to get there on time,
Mhm.
but I don't know. And I did find out that when my mom and dad were driving, I don't know where my mom and dad were when this was happening to Damien, and they're not even alive now for me to check, which is a whole other
Mhm.
story. But I do remember hearing that my mom and dad were driving behind the ambulance, and my mom just kept saying, the lights aren't on. The lights aren't on. Why aren't the lights on? Dennis, why aren't the lights on? And now I know why. So this is halfway through my first master's program.
Mhm.
A month later, so I go back to school like 2 weeks later or whatever, because what else am I going to do? Right?
Right.
School. I'm good at school.
Mhm.
Do that. 2 weeks later, my sister gives birth to my nephew, who she gives up for adoption immediately. A month after that, my mom picks up here from the East Coast and moves to the Midwest where her family is from. So technically lost my mom too. I lost my mom
Mhm.
to the loss anyway. We become the forgotten children. My dad stayed behind, I think, for a month or something, and then he followed her out there. So I lost him too. And then my sister. So then I'm left alone without my nuclear family and just tried to move forward. I remember a professor of mine in my family therapy class said, "Ever thought about going to therapy?" And I'm like, "What for?" I don't understand. So I ended up going back to I went to
Mhm.
therapy, and I was like, "Oh, this is not
Yeah, yeah.
this sucks. This sucks, and this is amazing at the same time, right?"
Well, even at that moment at the hospital where you were watching out for your mom, you were as the parentified child,
Oh yeah,
right? You
my whole
had
life, yeah.
so going to therapy would have meant breaking some of that down.
Oh yeah, that wasn't fun
Okay.
because I that's where I found out about what that meant. That's where my therapist said, "Are you aware that this is what this is?" And I was like, and then I had to like figure out how to pull myself out of a lot of triangulations between my
Mhm.
parents because those were still happening. My mom, when she moved to the Midwest, she got sober. And when my dad went out, I think he eventually got sober too. That's a whole long story. But I would very much be part of being in between.
Mhm.
And sometimes it was really nice. My dad would call me up and be like, "You have any idea how much I love your mother?" That's what he would call to tell me. When I moved out to go get my doctorate in California, which would have been in 2000, and I think we moved in 2002, I didn't talk to them for 2 years. I was so fucking mad at them.
Mhm. I think talk about that enough in grief, right? The anger that we have
No.
around other people in the family. I think sometimes it's more acceptable to talk about the anger we have at the deceased person or ourselves, but we don't want to necessarily always talk about that disruption in the family system.
I think also women are socialized to not be allowed to feel anger. We can be sad, but angry,
Mm-hmm.
and I know gender's fluid and all of that, but I'm just saying in general. I know in the Italian American culture, you know, I could tell you stories about my goofy family.
Yeah.
And it's weird because I'm finding myself feeling really protective right now of my
Mm-hmm.
mom and dad.
That's okay.
They were also amazing people.
Mm-hmm.
And after last year, I just miss them a lot.
Yeah, of course you do.
So I feel protective of them. They
Mm-hmm.
were fallible human beings, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I loved them a lot. And they were a pain in my ass all at the same time,
All of that can be true,
right?
all at the same time.
And
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
why'd I do my makeup? It's so stupid. Oh my God. Okay.
So you were out there. What made you reconnect with them?
Probably more therapy. I think,
Let's do a plug for therapy.
yeah, right. I think being in my doctorate program, and you learn a lot,
Mm-hmm.
through being in school. First of all, you learn that you have every single disorder there is in the
Yeah,
DSM.
absolutely. Mm-hmm.
I had everything. I had everything from schizoaffective disorder to borderline personality disorder. Pretty sure I was on the spectrum. Like it was everything,
Yeah.
right? And we all go through that cohort.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what happened. I don't know if it was the death, loss, and grief course I ended up taking, the elective. I got to be honest, I don't remember. All I know is I remember calling and talking about my anger and my resentment and how pissed off I was that they didn't protect us and they didn't protect him and
Mm-hmm.
actually became an accessory, in my opinion, to his death. And
Mm-hmm.
I just put it out there and it was tenuous, but she listened. It's weird. I remember talking to my mom. I don't remember talking to my dad about it. I talked to my mom. I talked to my dad about it a lot later on in our life. And then I think we just started building tenuously. And then it really got healthier
Mm-hmm.
because I felt their shame. I heard their shame. I felt their absolute, we all of our identities got completely smashed, right? Very disorganized. We were already screwed up, but we were our own screwed up, but we got very disorganized. And I think we started to reorganize and maybe in a weird way, in a healthier way, because I wasn't being parentified anymore. And if I started feeling they were trying to pull me into that place, I could catch it really fast and pull back out of it and be like, nope, I'm not taking care of that. That's on you. And I never even thought about that till right now.
So rebuilding that and
Rebuilding it,
rebuilding the
but
relationships in a way
yeah.
that worked post-loss.
Yeah, but I'm just now realizing, when we talk about meaning making, and
Mm-hmm.
it just occurred to me that I don't know if Damien hadn't died, if I would have learned how parentified I was and then be able to reestablish a relationship in a way that wasn't as parentified. I'm not going to say it was 100% not, but it
Mm-hmm.
definitely was healthier. The
Mm-hmm.
parentification came into play a lot when, after, whatever, after my dad died and stuff. You go back into old roles, but ultimately, I think it made us a healthier family.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't think about that till right. I'm
That's
so
an
glad I'm doing
interesting
this
revelation.
freaking podcast. Oh my God. I cannot wait to tell my therapist friend, mom, colleague.
And for our listeners, that's not normal. We're just joking about that for those of you not in therapy.
It's my transference. It's healthy to have the transference. We know our boundaries, all of that. I still want to go on a retreat with her. No, she's helped me. She's helped me a lot. That's interesting. Angela, I didn't think about that till right now.
Well, I think that also brings up an interesting point around meaning making and grief in general, right? Without some of these losses, we wouldn't be doing the things that we're doing. Like you and I would not have met had we both not had this loss.
I never would have become, I can't imagine I would have become a thanatologist. I cannot imagine. I can't take away what happened. I'd give up my career to have my family back.
Absolutely.
But that's just not the reality. Reality is, okay, well, I'm not getting him back. So what do I do with that?
Mm-hmm.
I try to rebuild understanding who I am, but I have to find some form of benefit. It doesn't take the pain away, but it allows me to reconstruct a narrative, of how I understand who I am and what I do in the world and the meaning behind doing like your podcast, doing my podcast, doing all the things I do, and knowing that my pain and my losses can help heal thousands of people and it ripples out further than I even know.
Mm-hmm.
That helps me look at my loss of Damien and say, there's my legacy.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. I know that when we met, we were talking a lot about your parents and your recent loss of them and your health, and you can share whatever you wish there. And it sounds like you've done a lot of work around repairing those relationships. I guess I have multiple questions and I'm asking them all at once. So I'm just going to say, what do you want to say about that? And then I'll go.
Say them all. Where do you want me to start?
I guess the questions are like, what do you want to say about those relationships? And the other thing I was thinking is a lot of our listeners, a lot of our guests, a lot of people I've worked with are not in this place. And we fear this place, including myself, that you've been in, where we're now tasked with taking care of our aging parents and losing them without having our sibling.
Right.
And it strikes me like probably 2 years ago, if we had met, we're probably in a similar spot with that.
Oh, yeah, I imagine. Yeah, I would think about that.
Mm-hmm.
That was my presentation at the APA and at ADEC was on sibling loss across the lifespan and how it disrupts the plan that you begin to have, right? We're the sandwich generation. We're supposed to take care of our parents and take care of our kids at the same time. I never knew what the plan was going to be because with Damien dying so early, that was literally half my life ago. Might as well have been yesterday and yet still half my life ago. And my sister's been estranged from the family for quite a while. She never bounced back from Damien dying, and she has her own lot of trauma and a lot of drug use that really screwed up her brain. And I've attempted. We're not on bad terms. We're just not close, right? So I figured there was going to be a time where I was going to have to take care of one or both of my parents. As much as they went through hell together, they were very much soulmates. They very much loved each other. And God, marriage isn't always, hey, isn't this great? It's who do you want to be next to you to fight through all of the storms? And as much as the storms were really shaky in my family and shaky with my parents, they never left each other. 52 years. So that whole awareness that I was going to have to take care of one or both of them as they got older scared the shit out of me. Because I was like, am I bringing them into my home? Like they live 1,500 miles away or 1,100, whatever. They live far away. They're going to have to come here. I can't pick up my family and move out there. I don't want to stick them in a home because I just didn't have the courage to do that. It takes a lot of courage to do that. It
Sure
does.
does.
But I might have had to. My mom had macular degeneration, blah, 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 all these, the health related stuff started happening. But they were very much like young, older adults. Like my father was still working. He loved to work. I just thought, if my dad dies, my mom's not going to survive that. But if my mom dies, I think my dad would survive it for a while. And I was right.
Hmm.
So when they died last year, and we can talk about that, but when they died last year, there was part of me, I wasn't relieved that they were dead. I was relieved that the pressure of what the hell I was going to do later on in my life in order to take care of them was not going to have to be called into question. And I feel some guilt about that, but I think knowing like what I do and knowing that it's okay to feel that way, it doesn't mean that it still doesn't bring up these little in my stomach.
Hmm.
I still have that, but I understand it. I would still bring them
Hmm.
to my home. I still would have done that. But there was part of me that was they were going to be financially dependent on me, physically dependent on me. And I'm getting to a point in my life where my stepsons are moving out of the house and I'm moving into a new phase of my own life and things that I want to do. But that would have had to have changed if I had to take
Hmm.
care of them. And I hope that doesn't make me sound cold because I would in a second. But I
Absolutely.
think that there's part of me that didn't want my identity tied up into being a caregiver.
Mm.
And that's just the reality of it. I grew up
Well,
as
you've
a
also
caregiver.
been a caregiver, right? Your entire life,
My
you've been a
entire life,
caregiver.
my freaking career is a,
Exactly.
caregiver, you know what I mean? Which I love my career. Don't get me, I do. I wouldn't take that back for a second. I love what I do. But last year was hell. It was interesting how later on in my life I became very close to my dad,
Hmm.
not as close to my mom. When growing up, I was closer to my mom, and that shifted. But my dad and I, if I was in the car, I was driving somewhere, I'd call my dad.
Hmm.
And sometimes he would just call and just say, I'm just calling because I love you and your 1,000-watt smile. That's what he would say. And you're brilliant and you're kind. And I'm so proud of you. And people are lucky to have you in their lives. And then, of course, with his little bit of narcissism, would go, but that's because you're my daughter. I'm like, Jesus Christ. Listen, you can't even give me a compliment without turning it into about you. But that was my dad. He was a musician. He was on the stage, and he wasn't a musician on a stage later on in his life, but he was a musician. Always, always. Try to teach me the guitar. I don't know he had that patience. I didn't even have that much patience for me, much less him have that patience. So the traumatic way he died. The last time I saw my dad, though, was when my mom and dad had come out in December of 2013 because I got a knee replacement and my mom planned on staying and taking care of me. And she had done that when I got my other knee replaced in 2019. So she was going to stay. My dad drove her out and then he was going to drive back. But then 4 days later, I was diagnosed with leukemia. I wasn't allowed to leave the hospital. And they stayed about a week and a half and then they didn't know what to do with themselves. They couldn't take
Hmm.
care of me in the hospital. They came all the time. They were
Hmm.
there. Sometimes I'd be like, you don't have to be here the whole time. All you're doing is watching me watch TV and get a lot of chemo and watching my hair fall out. And I remember them coming to me after Christmas because obviously before Christmas, nobody was going anywhere because that was the anniversary of Damien's death.
Hmm.
And they said, what do you want us to do? Do you want us to stay? Do you want us to go? And I was like, there's no reason for you guys to stay. I get why you would want to go back. I love you. If you're local, it'd be different, it's okay. I'm not mad. I really wasn't, not even a little bit.
Hmm.
So the last time I saw them was when they were out here trying to take care of me.
I wonder how that feels to say that out loud, knowing that we just spent a bit of time talking about how you were taking care of them for much of your
I've
life.
said it a lot. It feels good to say that. That's not new to me. I've wrapped my head
Yeah,
around that over and over again over
that they
this
got to
past
take care
year
of
and a
you.
half. Yeah,
Mm.
I love that. Just like I
Mhm.
hang on to having been the last thing I said to Damien was I love you. The
Yeah.
last time my parents were together and with me was them taking care of me. I cherish that. Not the last memory I had of my mom, but I still
Mm.
cherish that.
Yeah. So you've been studying sibling loss for a
Oh,
long
yeah.
time,
Oh, yeah.
driven by your loss so early, right?
Yep.
Our listeners tend to range from they lost their sibling yesterday or today to decades ago. So do you have a message you want to share across the lifespan?
First off, this sucks.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that's going to change the fact that this sucks and allow it to suck. and allow yourself to feel the conflicting emotions, because there might be. I don't know the range of ties of that relationship, whether or not you were tight and two peas in a pod, or if you were estranged, or it was, your 1-year-old brother and you were 5, who knows? But allow yourself to feel all the feels and give yourself permission for that, even if they're uncomfortable. Realize that how you understand who you are and what those futures are that you imagined are not coming back. And I don't mean that in a mean way. I'm just saying we can't go back to who we were. You have to figure out who you're going to become.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a natural adaptive process, and it'll come naturally if you allow yourself to do it.
Mm-hmm.
You allow yourself to go through it. There's no resolution of grief.
Mm-hmm.
There's integration. There's figuring out how to maintain a continued bond, understanding that it's a cultural thing. You have
Right.
to make sure it's culturally right.
Or appropriate, depending on the relationship.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That it's okay to find joy and happiness again in your life. It's okay to not feel ready for that. Your loss is going to be different than I will never look at you, Angela, and say, "Oh my God, I lost my brother too. I know exactly how you feel."
Right.
I could never ever say that to you.
Yeah.
Right. And so people say dumb shit when they think they're helping you.
Absolutely.
And one thing you might want to do is think about ways of how you're going to respond to the dumb things that people say,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of times they come from very loving places. Other times people are just stupid and they don't think about what they're talking about. Other times it's just triggering their own stuff and they don't even know what to do with themselves. Know that the loss of your sibling will come back up in different places at different times. What we would call a sudden transitory upsurge of grief.
Mm-hmm.
I call them a STUG. I don't know where I read that. I stole
Therese
that.
Rando.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Yes. She was in my dissertation all over the place. I love her. I've talked to her before. So we have these STUGs, allow them to be there. It might be because of a holiday. It might be because you saw a blue car and your sister drove a blue car. Let
Mm-hmm.
yourself have them and realize you're not back to where you started. You're moving forward. It's just in a different, complicated, crazy way. But you're going to hit milestones in your life, and there's going to be a whole nother layer and a different meaning. And as you get older and you had these, who was going to be the person who I was going to turn to about talking about our family holidays, who's taking care of Christmas this year, who's taking care of Thanksgiving, like all these things are going to change, and it is going to require adaptation and boundaries for yourself and your family, and to give yourself permission for things to change without feeling like you have to meet the expectations of other people. And I can say that it sounds very theoretical and
Right.
very psychologist-y, but do what you can.
Absolutely. And I think giving yourself permission to do that is sometimes hard.
Yeah.
I also grew up in an Italian American family where these expectations, Sunday dinners, or you have to be at the holidays, or you have to do X, Y, Z, with all of the guilt. Yeah, we actually do 13. But yeah, allowing yourself that permission to say, that doesn't work for me today. It might next year, it might tomorrow, but giving yourself permission to disappoint people so that you're not disappointing yourself.
There's a lot of, and obviously we don't have to get into it, but one of the presentations I do is grief around the holidays, the different things that you can do and different things to help navigate those holidays. And my dissertation was on the use of nature-based rituals. So of course I'm going to throw rituals all in there, but that's not the only thing. There's a lot of like simple things, because cognitively you may not be doing so well. Physically, you may not be doing so well. You might have been a caregiver for your sibling and you watched your sibling die. You go from being a caregiver to now what? All of a sudden, everything is gone. The whole way you ran your life is immediately switched off as soon as the death of your sibling happens. That's a huge freaking adjustment.
Sure is, yeah.
Different roles. So, yeah, you're right. So there is that. Get help if you need to. My encouragement, and I say this a lot, is if you're going to find a therapist who specializes in grief, please know that almost every single therapist will, in their advertisements, say that they're grief specialists because they have a lot of clients that grieve. Everybody grieves. That's like the point. Every therapist is going to have clients that grieve. Call and ask questions about their training. If you want somebody who truly specializes in this, ask them about their training, ask them about how they understand grief. Don't be afraid to ask questions. You're hiring somebody.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I say to if I have new clients, I'm like, I'm on a job interview right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing if you want to hire me to do,
Yeah.
if I'm good enough to do this work with you.
Yeah.
You know, you're not,
Right. Not every therapist is a good fit. And
no.
not all of us, most of us actually don't have the grief training. Right.
Oh, yeah,
So I think you and I know what we would ask.
sure.
What should our listeners ask for if they're not? First, if they mention the 5 stages is what they're working with, I think that's an easy, let's maybe move
Yeah.
on.
Next, next thing is, well,
where else are you doing your training? Was it one class?
yeah,
Is this what you mostly work with? How do you define loss?
I would say, well, first off, don't be afraid to therapist shop.
Yeah.
And, go see somebody for 2 or 3 sessions. It doesn't work, leave, go find another
Yeah.
one. I had 3 therapists out here in Delaware before I landed on the one I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. Questions, exactly what you just said. Help me understand what your training is in grief. Did you take a class like you said,
Mm-hmm.
or do you take CEUs? How do you understand what the grieving process looks like?
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever, learned about prolonged grief disorder? Where did you learn about that? How long have you been in practice? How long would you say that you've been able to continue your development as somebody who works with grief? How do you continue
Mm-hmm.
to keep your skills sharp? How would you identify whether or not my grief has gone into an unhealthy grief trajectory versus a natural adaptive process? What kinds of ways do you think about helping somebody with grief?
Mm-hmm.
Because if they start saying cognitive behavioral therapy, turn around and walk out the door.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
We are not challenging irrational thinking patterns in grief. Everything feels irrational. It doesn't mean
Yes.
that it's a mental illness. So I want to know about narrative therapy. I want to know
Yes.
about somebody who can talk about fluidity, narratives, and stuff like that. What kind of
Mm-hmm.
interventions do you like to do? Yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Thank you. You mentioned continuing bonds,
Hmm.
right? How do you stay connected? Or do
Oh,
you stay connected with
oh
Damien?
yeah. Oh yeah. With Damien, or like Damien and now my parents too.
Yes. However you want to answer that.
Because I'm just going to quickly drop this. I said I lost my parent. Last time I saw my parents together was December of 2023 when I was diagnosed with leukemia. 4 months later, my dog died, and then 4 months later, my dad fell down the basement stairs, died in the middle of the night, died. My mom heard him, cradled him in her arms as he died. I went flying out there to help because my mother, in her older age, had become the old-fashioned role of the
Mm-hmm.
housewife, so to speak. So she didn't even know where the bank accounts were. So I
Mm-hmm.
went out there, shoved my grief down as best I could, and had a week try to help her get her shit together so she was going to be able to be alone. And the day I left, I came back. She died in her sleep a week later. And then 2 months later, they didn't even get to learn that I went into maintenance from my treatment. So 2024 can suck it. I hate 2024. It's the worst year of my entire life. So I've had to try to figure out how to maintain continued bonds. And then that shifts throughout the years. So with Damien, it used to be a little bit more complicated when it first happened. I always do a ritual on that starts on Christmas Eve, and I take it into Christmas Day because I can't function that day and be with my family unless I have the container of ritual. I talk about them. I share stories about them. It was more at the beginning. It'll be 26 years this Christmas.
Hmm.
So how, I do presentations. I talk about them
Mm-hmm.
in my presentations. I talk about them in probably almost every single one of my presentations. I go into work and I know that the reason why I built that organization started with the loss of Damien. And I know that, and all of my employees know it. And I, to the point where it's such a legacy that I've actually willed down my organization to the person who is my vice president of my company, who he's been with me since the beginning. He's going to keep the company once I die. I just told him he has to put a picture up of my headshot, and it has to be from when I was 42, and it was a really good headshot. It cannot be the ones I just got done, with this hair. I can't even right now. So his birthday rolls around. I attend to that. I have certain linking objects of his. I don't have a lot, but those mean a lot to me. At the beginning, I was writing a lot of correspondence to him.
Mhm.
I think his imprint on me, those things I want to affirm, are part of who I am now. I want to be funny. He was funny, you
Mm.
know. I want to be caring. I think I am, you know. He was caring. These are ways in which I carry him. And there are things that he was like that I want to relinquish. And that's a way of remaining connected to him too. So I've internalized him. So more, not so much externalizing things as much. It's more internalizing now over the years. But this past year, I did, when we were at the Portland Institute, it was the year
Mhm.
anniversary of my dad's death. And I went out into the woods and did my ritual and came back and cried with all of you
Mhm.
guys and just surrounded myself with the most amazing women on the planet. First of all, for your listeners, I don't think they know. I don't know if they could possibly know what a freaking wonderful person you are. You were a huge, and I don't even think you know how much you impacted me when I met you and how I didn't feel alone. And a lot of people are there because of their losses, but you and I
Mhm.
have a lot of parallels, and I'm thankful to have met you. So thank you for that. And I'm
You're
glad you
welcome.
were there.
And I felt the same. Oh, thank you.
This past year, this past Christmas sucked. I didn't do well. It was probably the only time I can remember, even through all the cancer treatment and my continued cancer treatments, where a couple days before Christmas, you have that anticipation, knowing that my mom and dad aren't there. I'm estranged from my sister. Damien's death is there. I actually woke up. I don't think I actually woke up the Sunday before Christmas and thought to myself, I don't think I would care if I didn't wake up.
Mm.
Never felt like that. So I immediately reached out to my support system and I called my best friend who's in California and I told her, and I got through the day and again, my support system, everybody wants to come to my house and I'm so lucky. But like the day after Christmas, my best friend called me and she goes, how are you doing? And I was like, well, I'm doing a lot better. I'm so freaking thankful to get through the day. And she goes, "Me calling was, helpful?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course it was helpful." She goes, "So if I was there for a few days, that would probably still be helpful?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, are you coming out here?" And
Is she on your front
she
porch?
is so busy. She picked her ass up, flew out here for 2.5 days just to be with me
Oh.
through all of that. And I would do the same, for her. And for different things, where, if she says help, I say, yeah, help. What do you need me to jump over? I'll be
Mhm.
there.
Yeah.
My way of staying connected is to allow myself to feel it, but I have to then use my coping skills. But
Mhm.
to acknowledge and admit that I actually had this like kind of passive, I didn't have a sense of like I wanted to be dead. There wasn't like, oh, if I'm dead, I'll be able to reunite with my brother. Like, I
Mhm.
didn't have that by any stretch, but I just had this is so big and so heavy that I cannot hold it right now. It's
Mhm.
just too much. I don't wanna be with it anymore. So,
Well, and you had also just lost your dog and your health and your parent.
all the things.
So all of the things on an anniversary that has been hard for a long time.
Yep,
So it makes sense.
yep.
I'm glad that you have a great support system.
Oh my god. I never would have gotten through it. Yeah, please have a support system. That's another thing I would just
Mhm.
say. If you don't have a support system, see what you can do to develop one or find one, even if that's a support group. Be surrounded by people who will acknowledge and validate the way that you feel and not make you feel like you should be feeling a different way.
Right. Absolutely. And I think in this disenfranchised loss of sibling loss and also the stigma that comes with addiction loss, right?
Hmm.
Finding people, and maybe this is also a question when you're interviewing a therapist, making
Hmm.
sure that they're not invalidating those losses for you
Yeah.
as well.
Or you're not invalidating it for yourself. You're going through a
Absolutely.
lack of self
Yeah.
compassion,
Mm-hmm.
what I would consider like a self oppression,
Mm-hmm.
where you're internalizing the cultural expectations that you have been hearing and feeling, not only from just everyone around you, but in your own
Mm-hmm.
cultural expectations. If
Yeah.
those aren't landing with you, you taking away your acknowledgement and validation to grieve is going to make this worse.
Mm-hmm.
significantly worse. And if people around you are doing that, find some ways. I coach, it's a real quick one if you want me to share with
Yeah.
you. But I teach my clients, and I do it myself, a sandwich way of approach. If somebody, especially if somebody's coming to me, or going to the client with I just want to make you feel better. Oh, he's in a better place. He's not
Mm-hmm.
suffering. No, he's not. He's not fucking here. And it's not in
Mm-hmm.
a better place. If he was in a better place, he'd be here, right? So sometimes when people say stupid things like that, they're coming from this place of wanting to say something helpful. I will role play with my clients. Okay, let's start with, look, Angela, I know what you're saying right now. You're trying to help me feel better. And I appreciate that because that makes me feel like you care about me. But what you just said made me feel shut down because I felt like I'm not allowed to feel what I'm feeling because I'm supposed to be feeling what you have just said. I should be thankful or relieved. So, really, what would be helpful right now? Just give me a hug or just ask me how Damien's doing and use his name.
Mm-hmm.
How is Damien doing? And that would be so helpful for me. And I just want you to know that. And I'm telling you this because I do care about you. So you don't just tell somebody that they
Right.
hurt you when they hurt you. You tell them what to do so they don't do something stupid because people will say dumb things because they don't know what else to say.
Right. And I like how your end part of that sandwich is very specific. It's not like it would be helpful if you just ask how I'm doing once in a while. You're very specific. In this moment, this is what would be helpful.
Mhm.
Yeah. And you're validating your own emotions in that middle part of it, or your
Also need to
experience.
know what is helpful for you too.
Absolutely.
Like become aware of, is it helpful for people to
Mhm.
hug? Am I really uncomfortable saying that? It would be really helpful if you could just take over, you know, making the desserts for Christmas.
Mhm.
That would make me feel very cared for because that's what, Damien used to do, something like that.
Right.
So be clear about what you need.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Is there anything else that you wanted to share today or talk about that we didn't?
No, I just want to just thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see how it unravels as we're coming up to the second Christmas. I do want to say, I think sometimes the second year can be worse than the first.
Mm-hmm.
So you got all the first and you're a little bit still foggy sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And then that fog begins to lift. And then you can become fully in front of the rawness
Mm-hmm.
of life without the fog. And that provides you with
Yeah.
opportunity to lean into your grief, but to understand that it's okay to take that slow. And that's not weird.
Right.
It's okay for the second year, the third year. It's okay for that to be
Mm-hmm.
harder.
And I think not expecting every year to be the same or
Right.
every anniversary. Yeah.
No, I think you're right. Because some
Yeah.
Christmases are fine. And other ones, I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I do not even want to get out of bed.
Mm-hmm.
Just sucks this one.
Yeah.
If you knew my brother, you would know he would pick a freaking day that there was no damn way I was going to forget it.
I
And
hear
it kind
that.
of goes back and forth with some stories that we have,
Yeah.
like stories around Christmas.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
That might be a nice segue into my last question for you.
Okay.
What are some of your favorite memories
Mhm.
of you and Damien?
So I got this one. I was just telling this one because I was presenting on Grief around the holiday. So I was talking about Christmas. And I remember when I was 9,
After
damn, I
you
think
hit a car?
I was just realizing, no, this was a different bike because this one got stolen because we lived in such a crappy neighborhood. But I was 9 and he was 5. And we decided, Christmas Eve to go and, like low crawl like your military, like going under barbed wire. And we're like low crawling into the living room and looking at the tree and looking at the presents under the tree. But then, like, right next to the tree was like a sliding glass door. And I could hear the clicking of a 10-speed bike. Do you know what I'm talking about? It goes
Yeah.
so it was going across. And instead of us running back to our bedrooms like normal children would, we just played possum and laid on the floor and pretended we were asleep. And Damien is going, seriously, like fake snoring. And instead of my parents getting pissed, they're just laughing at this point. And they're like, go back to bed. That was one of my favorite memories of him. And then another favorite memory, which is interesting, it's also Christmas, is stockings were a big deal in our family
Mhm.
because, again, you can put a lot of little things in there. My mom wrapped everything to put in there. So the stockings were like filled with shit, like socks and lollipops and all this stuff. And we would each give each other a gift, as best we could. So one year I open up my stocking, taking all the other things out, and I look at the bottom of my stocking and there's a pile of colored chalk. And I'm like, who put a pile? First of all, you ruined the inside of my stocking. Now I got chalk all up in my stocking. We have to have a conversation about that. But second, who put a pile of chalk in the bottom of my stocking? And my brother, as proud as Damien could be, was like, I did. He was like excited about it. I'm like, why didn't you dump it out of the box? Answer, because it made it look like there was more. And you might have had a point there. So to this day, I remember we were learning the intervention called photo narratives, which you just run around, you take pictures of things that remind you of the person. And it was at the PI Institute retreat. And I remember going into the creative arts studio where Sharon was.
Yeah.
Sharon Strauss is a colleague of ours who's amazing. Anyway, I go in there and I saw a thing of colored chalk. And I didn't think 2 seconds of it. And that entire memory came back to me immediately. Immediately. And I took a picture of that chalk and then came back and we talked about our pictures. And that's another one of my favorite memories. So it's interesting that they're both, I recognize that they're both on Christmas. That's two of my favorites. We have other ones, but those are two of my favorites.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on. It was so good to see you. Thank you so much for listening. Our theme song was written by Joe Millwood and Brian Dean and was performed by Joe Millwood. If you would like more information on The Broken Pack, go to our website, thebrokenpack.com. Be sure to sign up for our newsletter, Wild Grieve, to learn about opportunities and receive exclusive information and grieving tips for subscribers. Information on that, our social media, and on our guests can be found in the show notes wherever you get your podcasts. Please like, follow, subscribe, and share. Thanks again.
You're second guessing, oh, you never know, you just never know.